Welcome to the ZimmCast, a program dedicated to bringing you what's new in agricultural marketing. The ZimmCast is the official podcast of AgWired and hosted by Chuck and Cindy Zimmerman.
Hello and welcome to this edition of the ZimmCast on clean and renewable fuels. I'm Cindy Zimmerman. Two of the first conferences for us at ZimmCom every year are the Clean Fuels Conference, which used to be the National Biodiesel Conference, and the National Ethanol Conference. We've been covering both for almost 20 years, since 2006 for biodiesel and 2007 for ethanol. Both industries have changed and grown over the years, and they continue to have their challenges and opportunities. This year, Clean Fuels Alliance America welcomed nearly 850 attendees from over 20 countries to connect with the key players from the biodiesel, renewable diesel, and sustainable aviation fuel industries at the Clean Fuels Conference in Fort Worth, Texas. Clean Fuels CEO Donnell Rehagen says despite EPA's disappointing final renewable fuel volume obligations released last year for biomass-based diesel, there's still plenty of opportunities for the industry.
I remain very bullish. For some, that's a hard thing right now. I mean, as I acknowledged, it's not an easy time right now in our industry, but as I reminded everybody, we've had a number of bad times in our industry, and so we're just sort of made up of a bunch of folks that just won't go away and won't take no for an answer. So with the demand growing the way it is for our fuels, it seems to me there's no way that the marketplace can't figure this out for us, because the country, actually the world, needs our fuels, and they need us to be wildly successful. So our biggest challenge now is just how we get policymakers at the federal and state level to make sure they're making the right decisions that encourage that investment and that growth, and not something that sort of stymies us. And we find ourselves in a little bit of a stymied position right now. So what I believe is that the demand for our fuels in these new emerging markets, I mentioned them, rail, marine, and bioheat, they need these fuels, and they've not been getting any of these fuels really to speak of historically. And so those are new markets. We're moving 4 billion gallons of our fuels and haven't moved hardly any into rail and marine. I mean, literally hardly any. So you heard Angela Cadell from BNSF talk about where they're going, and they're going to have some big announcements coming out about what their commitment is to using our fuels. She talked about their company alone uses well over 1 billion gallons of diesel fuel. So for me, it's about acknowledging the policy challenges, and that's what we're talking about with the RFS. But at the same time, that's coupled with the highest level of demand for our fuels we've ever had. So that's why I believe the market will figure it out. You know, it needs to figure it out because it needs us to keep producing at levels we've never produced before. And that can't happen if the market conditions aren't right. So I don't look at the RFS as 100% of the time going to be a lid. I look at it and it has the opportunity to be more of a floor. The RVOs were, let me be very clear, the EPA got it dreadfully wrong. There's no way to make that sound better than that. And I think if they would look at the market today compared to the market before they set these RVOs, they would have to admit that they got it woefully wrong. Now, we have to live with that. You know, they set those volumes for 3 years. It's the first time they ever set them for multiple years. So, again, I'm back to the market now knows what 2024 volumes are going to look like. They know what 2025 volumes look like from an RVO perspective, and everybody can start planning accordingly. You know, when we got the RVOs finalized last year in June, the year was half over. And the RVOs they set was not much over the volume that we had already produced at that time. So that's how woefully wrong they got it. We had already in half a year produced what they suggested we should produce for the year. So that's why I believe that there's opportunity because of the demand for the fuel. People want to buy it. So there's ways for markets to figure out how to put that together. Feedstocks at the moment are not the issue. We're seeing a lot of imported feedstock. We didn't used to see that either. So, again, that's a market reacting to demand for the finished fuel and figuring out how am I going to make enough to satisfy that demand. So that is why I start to say that you couple that with the crush plants that have been announced, and some of those are already online. A number of those will be coming online. So those are major investments by major companies. And they would not be making those investments if they didn't see higher demand for our fuels going forward as well. So to me, everybody sees the fact that we should be growing and growing fast, except the EPA. And that's the part we got to fix.
Clean Fuels Chairman Michael Rath with Darling Industries says the clean fuels industry has grown in directions no one expected when it first started.
You know, the industry's well over 20 years old now, and I'm proud to say in the last year we've really had what I would call a storybook year. We've increased production domestically from 3 billion gallons in 22 to over 4 billion gallons in 23, over a 33% increase here. And then we've also had the Inflation Act passed, which gave us more stability than ever before in both an RV tax forward-looking program of 3 years, 5 years total, about a year and a half back, and then forward-looking. And then secondly, we've got an RVO a couple years out here as well. So from that standpoint, we've got more stability than we have ever had. Granted, we would like the RVOs to be larger than they are, but our industry's faced these challenges before, and we will get through them. And then, I think there's some other milestones that I'd like to comment on. Number one, we had our first transatlantic flight on 100% SAF this last year. We've also had home burners that are compatible with 100% bioheat that are out in the marketplace now. We had a new ASTM spec of low metal biodiesel, passed ASTM. And then in addition to that, we've had marine legislation introduced. We've also had OEM approval of 100% RD for locomotives. So I think, across the spectrum of applications in transportation fuel and home heating fuel, we've had a lot of positives come to the marketplace here. So I'm really looking forward to the next few years of the growth that our industry can provide and really the value back to agriculture. I think renewable fuels is still the greatest value add to our agriculture that we have. Just to give you an example, the state of California with their low-carbon fuel program, we have replaced, since 2017, we are now 60% of the diesel usage now. In other words, only of the 3-4 billion gallons that were used, 60% of that now is renewable base. And I think by 2030, that's going to be almost 100%. So, I think that's beyond anyone's imagination. 5 years ago, no less, 10 years ago. Our story is so easy to tell. Transportation fuel is one of the hardest ways to reduce GHGs, and yet ours reduces up to 85% of GHG of petroleum diesel, and there's really no downstream investment needed. So, that's a drop-in fuel that fleets and consumers can utilize, and it helps meet sustainability goals around the world.
It's been a great conference. I know our numbers are up from last year when we were in Tampa as the first clean fuels name for the conference. And what I've seen here, it seems like we have a lot more folks from other countries that are here.
It has become an international conference, and it's also, downstream and upstream, all the way from the seed companies, biogenetics, to the fuel distributors, to railroads, to airline companies are attending now. So where are we going to have this in 30 years? It's going to be a big, big place, number one. And number two, I think, it's important to look back. Let's just go back 50 years. We were looking at population growth. We were going to double from 4 billion to 8 billion, which we have. And yet we've doubled the population, and we feed them today more efficiently than we did. Less water, less fertilizer. And, oh, by the way, we support renewable fuels programs in both ethanol and renewable and bio-based diesel. So, you go forward and look. Everyone thinks we got constraints. I don't think we have constraints. You just got to look at the past and look at what agriculture does. And we always meet and exceed expectations when the challenge is there.
The 29th National Ethanol Conference was held February 19th through the 21st in San Diego, And Renewable Fuels Association President and CEO Jeff Cooper says it was one of the best conferences in recent memory.
This is probably one of my favorite NECs that we've ever had, and I've been to a lot of them in the last 20 years. So this has been a great event. Lots of energy, lots of enthusiasm coming out of this conference for the opportunities that lie ahead. I think everybody is really charged up about the bright future that this industry has. We covered a lot of territory the last few days surrounding all of the potential new opportunities, new markets, new uses for ethanol, new technologies, and it's just very exciting stuff, very inspiring, and I'm looking forward to the year ahead. We certainly have some challenges ahead of us. We talked about those as well. I said yesterday in my State of the Industry address that this is going to be a year where the rubber meets the road for the ethanol industry. There's a lot of important decisions that we are anxiously awaiting, regulatory decisions, policy decisions that are going to have a important bearing on the future of this industry, not just in the short term, but perhaps for decades to come. So, again, great event, great attendance. We had the most people here that we've probably had in 8 or 9 years. A lot of first-time attendees, which is very exciting. So overall, great event. I'm very pleased.
RFA Chairman Eric Hushett with Badger State Ethanol says there are still some challenges for biofuels producers right now, with one of the most important being the ability to participate in tax credits under the Inflation Reduction Act to produce sustainable aviation fuel.
The good thing is we're all time tested, because being in the ethanol industry, nothing comes in a straight line and nothing is easy. So the biggest challenges in my view is seeing if we have policymakers, and especially when it comes to the details of the implementation of the IRA, we need to have a good solid foundation, and we need to have line of sight to what does the market need and how does the market help us get there. So that's the biggest challenge. We have so much work to do, but you can't lay it until you get the rules, and so everybody is on hold until we see that.
What did you think about what Secretary Vilsack had to say about E15 nationwide?
Well, if I'm being very honest, I'm a little bit nerdy in the fact that he's been my hero since I heard him speak 15 years ago. The fact that if we have to wait till 2025, it's an embarrassment of our political leadership that they can't get it done earlier. We'll take it in 2025, and we will certainly expect waivers now, because it's what our country needs, it's what the consumer needs. And so as long as we have a clear path to be able to have year-round E15, we'll show a little more patience.
Well, RFA honored Secretary Vilsack with an award, and also honored Dr. Michael Wang with Argonne, who developed the Greek bottle. And here we're looking at a March 1st deadline for revisions to that. What are your feelings about that? How do you feel about whether you're going to get what you want?
Well, my concern is the science has always been on ethanol's side. And we hear all of these other examples of, if you want to make a tilted playing field and give the advantage to EVs by not recognizing the life cycle analysis, my frustration is deep in the fact that this is not equitable. If the goal is to clean the environment, we have the tools ready today. We've had the tools ready for 20 years. And if politicians and policymakers were serious about it, they would pay a better attention and sit up, because we have the tools in this room to help be part of the solution today, not 10 years from now, not 2050, and we have it in a way that is economically prosperous, not a taxpayer-subsidized program on the base of somebody else footing the bill. This is cleaner, more affordable, and so I'm very, very passionate about the fact that we have the tools in the kit. We need policymakers to stand up and recognize that. And I know it's a continual fight, and we've won so many battles, we've had so many progress. But again, it goes back to the first thing we said. Never a clear line of sight. It's always a mountain to climb till you get to the next one.
And yet, you're still optimistic.
Absolutely. I'm optimistic because of this, is I know that science is on our side. And I know that the brilliant people and the dedicated people and the passion that's in this room will not be overcome by any politician's naysayer that exists in the marketplace. So I'm very, very optimistic about agriculture's future.
Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack told attendees at the National Ethanol Conference that USDA went to bat for the biofuels industry to get the other government agencies working on implementation of the IRA to utilize the GREET model.
That reflects what's happening in the countryside. You all know, and I know, and those who are in farming and ranching know, but most of America doesn't know, farming is a fairly sophisticated business, and farmers are pretty smart, and farmers are very committed to sustainability, and farmers care deeply about their land, and they care deeply about their communities, and they care deeply about the quality of water. And they are taking steps today to ensure that they improve their land and improve the productivity of their land and increase the sustainability and the resiliency of their farming operations. They're doing it. And this GREET model, I think, reflects that. We also have to make sure that the model recognizes and incorporates the various practices that farmers are engaged in. Now, you know, some days I love the media. Well, not very many. Some days I just kind of scratch my head. I go, where did that come from? So I want to assure you that we are working hard, even as early as this morning, on working to make sure that as we create these incentives, that they include room for climate-smart agricultural practices, which is going to make it easier for that which we grow and raise on our farms to be used as feedstock for sustainable aviation fuel, and make it easier for those of you who are in this business to be able to qualify for the various incentives. We're working hard to make that happen, and I'm confident that it will happen. Now, you're supposed to applaud at that right now. Now, why is that important? Because it basically creates a lower carbon score, and as it does, it makes it easier to qualify for those incentives.
Both conferences included panels and updates from airlines interested in SAF and companies on the front lines of getting it produced, like Gevo. Nancy Young, Chief Sustainability Officer for Gevo, spoke on a panel at Clean Fuels.
At Gevo, we're dedicated to delivering sustainable, low-carbon fuels, chemicals, and nutritional products. And we've been doing that for a number of years in a very pilot-scale kind of way. But our big goal is to launch our Net Zero 1 facility, and net zero being a key element in Lake Preston, South Dakota. And Gevo has been a pioneer in the alcohol-to-jet pathway. We are true believers in ethanol-to-jet and have done a lot in terms of developing that opportunity. And we've already heard from folks today on panels about the importance of today's agriculture. A lot of people don't really appreciate today's agriculture. They think of 100 years ago agriculture. We are very dedicated to supporting our farmers, and we are very dedicated to helping with climate smart ag to help realize additional values in the supply chain. We also are focused on every element of decarbonization in our supply chain. So when we think about our Net Zero 1 facility, we're bringing in wind power, renewable natural gas. We're planning to use carbon sequestration, CCS, and also green hydrogen. And we have that experience also now in tracking. You can't just say you're going to do it, you got to track it all the way to the field and the farm. And we have developed a tracking system called Verity Tracking to do that, really a distributed ledger system to bring it all the way from the field, in this case, when we're focused on sustainable aviation fuel, in addition to other fuels and chemicals, to bring it all the way to the seat of the aircraft. And so we're very excited about Net Zero 1, and the reason for that 1 is we plan on Net Zero 2, 3, and 4. So we got to get that first one done, but those are our goals.
That's great. So not only,
LanzaJet, which just had its grand opening in Georgia this year, is the other major player in the SAF market right now. And CEO Jimmy Samartzis spoke at the NEC.
We strongly believe that the United States presents the greatest opportunity for ethanol to SAF. There is an abundance of ethanol. There's additional capacity of ethanol. We have favorable state and national incentives that are in place and are developing. across the West Coast as well as in the heartland of the country. We have the opportunity to continue to improve the carbon intensity of ethanol, as well as a technology company, for us to improve the carbon intensity of our technology as well as it matures. You also have the opportunity to tap into waste sources to create ethanol. Think about your CO2 streams that you produce in ethanol production. We can capture that CO2 and create additional ethanol from it. We can take corn stover as Sapphire Renewables, for example, that can convert corn stover to ethanol. There are additional opportunities here beyond the traditional ethanol production that happens across the United States to think about other sources of material and feedstock that can create ethanol. We are fortunate enough that we come from a company called LanzaTech, which founded us and spun us out in 2020. So we have a way of getting to ethanol through a number of other waste streams. Have that be carbon monoxide from a steel mill, carbon dioxide from ethanol, or perhaps an oil refinery. It could be woody waste or ag residues. It can even be municipal solid waste, as well as direct air capture, pulling the CO2 directly out of the atmosphere and converting that to ethanol. LanzaTech has done this commercially. There's 6 plants operating globally where they're producing ethanol from these waste streams. So it's not science fiction. This is actually something that is very feasible to do here in the United States. I want to talk a little bit about our company and our history. So we have been behind the ethanol to SAF technology development since 2010. Our technology originated with the U.S. Department of Energy at the Pacific Northwest National Lab. We took it from there and scaled it up through pilot stage, demo stage, and in January of this year, we unveiled our first commercial plant. The data from our pilot and demonstration plant served to create the ASTM approval, which is required, which we achieved in 2018 for the ethanol pathway, which enables fuel produced using this technology to actually be used in commercial aviation safely.
Be sure to check our virtual newsrooms on agnewswire.com for both the National Ethanol Conference and the Clean Fuels Conference. And that's the ZimmCast for this time. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the ZimmCast, the official podcast of AgWired. Check us out at www.agwired.com to find out what's new in agricultural marketing.